the goal of my message today as we end this series on the Songs of Ascent, Psalm 134, we're going to talk. The whole goal is that we would have a rich time of worship at the end of this. I hope you have enjoyed this series, Songs of Ascent. I've never done a 15-week series on anything. It's been challenging. We've learned a lot. I was going to do a review today of the 14 previous chapters, and then I realized we'd be here till 2, and you would have none of that. I would have none of that. But in the Songs of Ascent, we have found the whole breadth of human experience and emotion. Joy and suffering, praise and anger, love and hate, every part of the human life. Even the nasty parts these psalms address. They're all presented to God in song and in prayer. This extraordinary collection of songs tells us every part of our life, every part can be prayed. Every part of our pilgrimage can be sung. Songs of celebration, laments, songs of questions and frustrations, songs of joy and hope. And today on our pilgrimage, we have arrived. Today we get to the end of the pilgrimage. We have arrived at the top of the mountain. We have arrived at Jerusalem. We have arrived at the temple to worship God. We have reached our goal. So the last Song of Ascent, Psalm 134, simply says, "Come bless God, all you servants of God. Lift your praising hands to the holy place and bless God. In turn, may God of Zion, God of Jerusalem," that's another name for Jerusalem, "God of Zion bless you, God who made heaven and earth." Today is a celebration that this arduous, dangerous journey, this pilgrimage has now paid off. We have reached our goal. It's interesting about reaching certain goals. Months of struggle, of strategy, and sacrifice all paid off in a landslide victory for President Richard Nixon in 1972. On election night, his aide, Charles Colson, was in the place he had always wanted to be. He had arrived at the mountaintop. The picture Colson draws of that night contains 3 figures. Chief of Staff H.R. Haldeman, arrogant and sullen, Nixon restlessly gulping scotch, and Colson feeling let down, deflated, and in his words, "There was a deadness inside of me." 3 men at the power pinnacle of the world, and not a single note of joy was discernible in the room. Chuck Colson says, if someone had peered in on us that night from the president's office, what a curious sight it would have been. A victorious president grumbling over words he'd have to say to his fallen foe, his chief of staff angry, surly, and snarling, and the architect of his political strategy, myself, sitting in numbed stupor. The experience is not that uncommon. We work hard for something, we get it, we reach the goal, and find it's not what we expected. Colson writes, "Being part of electing a president was the fondest ambition of my life. For 3 long years, I committed everything I had, every ounce of energy to Richard Nixon's cause. Nothing else mattered. And then, having in his hands what he had set out to gain, he found that it wasn't really what he was looking for. There was a deadness inside me." We can relate, right? For some, the goal is an academic degree, a career position, a certain standard of living, getting married, having a child, landing a job, accomplishing a dream. But having gotten what we had always wanted, we find we really didn't get what we were looking for. As that famous song goes, "I've climbed highest mountains. I've run through the fields. I've scaled these city walls. But I still haven't found what I'm looking for. I have kissed honey lips, felt the healing of her fingertips. I've spoke with the tongue of angels. I've held the hand of the devil. But I still haven't found what I'm looking for." Could be the song of our culture today. You know, since May, we started this series in May, we found that this pilgrimage to the mountaintop for these festivals has been full of adventure, challenge, passion, struggle, distraction. It has not been an easy journey, but we kept going because our eyes were set on the goal. But what happens when we finally arrive? The mountaintop. when we reach our goal? Is it what we really are looking for? Well, the good news, I was a little dramatic to get to this point. The good news is Psalm 134, the final song of Ascent, provides the evidence. Here it is. Come bless God, all you servants of God. Lift your praising hands to the holy place and bless God. In turn, may God of Zion bless you, God who has made heaven and earth. It doesn't take long to find the key word and thought in Psalm 134. Bless God, God bless you. We reach our goal at the top of the mountain, blessing God and being blessed by God. That's pretty cool, isn't it? The Hebrew word here, bless, is baraka. Everybody say baraka. Baraka. We're going to learn some Hebrew today. We're going to learn some German today, okay? Baraka. Baraka, blessed. I'm going to go slow here. It describes what God does to us and among us. Just receive this before we worship today. God enters into covenant with us. He blesses us. He pours out his own life for us. He shares the goodness of his spirit, the vitality of his creation, the joys of his redemption. God blesses us because God is a blesser. He empties himself among us, and we get what he is. That is, we get blessing. Our pilgrimage ends with the last word, baraka, blessed by God. God gets down on his knees among us, gets on our level, and shares himself with us. He does not reside far off and send us diplomatic messages. He kneels among us. That posture is characteristic of God. God enters into our need, whatever our needs are, and understands us better than we do ourselves. One of the things we try to do in life is what? Understand ourselves. He understands us more than we do. Everything we learn about God through Scripture is that he and his Son, Jesus, know every fear, every worry, every temptation, every desire, every wound, every frustration. He knows what it is like to change a diaper for the 13th time in a day. He knows what it is like to have a close friend betray you. He knows what it is like to have a dream and wonder if it will ever come true. He knows your hopes and desires, questions and doubts. He knows what it is like to have your generosity and kindness be taken for granted. He knows your physical pain and your emotional pain. He even knows, Jesus knows what it feels like to be forsaken by his Father. On the cross, when he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? There's a book on God, and it's titled, and I took this title of the book and made it my title today of my message. It's called A God Who Stands, Stoops, and Stays. I love this phrase. A God who stands, stoops, and stays. This summarizes the posture of God's blessings. God stands, he's foundational and dependable. God stoops, he kneels to our level and meets us where we are, and God stays. He sticks through us through hard times and good times, sharing his life with us in grace, wisdom, and truth. When everyone else runs, God stays. As they arrive at the mountaintop, these pilgrims are called to worship the God who stands, stoops, and stays. When you worship today, think of those three phrases as you worship God. God, you stand. You are the foundation. You stoop and meet me where I'm at, and you stay. You are faithful till the end. And because God blesses us, we respond with that which we have received. We bless God. That is Psalm 134. It is blessing, baraka. We who are blessed, bless. That's our lives. People who travel the way of faith, experiencing kindness and strength and grace and all kinds of weather over every kind of terrain. People who have experienced God's blessings in beautiful times and difficult times of life. Those kind of people become good at blessing. Psalm 134. Let me summarize it. Come, bless God, lift your praising hands, and bless God. The pilgrims have arrived. It's taken us 14 weeks to get here through wind and rain and heat and enemies and distractions and weariness, and now we are at the temple, friends. I want you to picture that today. We have arrived. Some would have been on the road for days, weeks, maybe even months. Think about arriving, traveling that far. When I was doing ministry in West Africa, Niger is a French well, it used to be a French country, West Africa, one of the poorest countries in the world. It's in the desert, it always has food scarcity, all of those things. But there's 1% Christianity in that country, and so there's these little pastors and little churches spread out all over trying to love on the people. And we did a pastors' conference in Niamey, the capital, and Compassion International paid the money to have these poor pastors travel in, and they lodged them up for 3 days just to love on these pastors. And there were some pastors, nomads today. No, they were nomads. They took camels, and it took them weeks to get to this conference. And you know what? I witnessed this. Those who traveled the furthest worshiped the most intensely. That'd preach right there. The pilgrims have arrived. What are they going to feel? What would they do? Would there be, as Chuck Colson said, a deadness inside? Come, bless God. The great promise of being in Jerusalem is that we all may join in rich worship. Do you know today, all around the world, there are Christians worshiping together. And God says in Psalm 134, you are now welcome to do it. Come and join. Come and join. This is why you took the trip. Don't be shy. Don't hold back. Did you fight with your spouse on the way? That's all right. You're here now. Just bless God. Did you quarrel with your neighbor while making the trip? Forget it. You're here now. Bless God. Did your children drive you crazy on the way? Put it aside. You're here. Bless God. Are you ashamed of your grumbling and whining along the way? Well, it wasn't bad enough to not keep you here, so bless God. Embarrassed at the number of times you were tempted to quit? It doesn't matter. You are here regardless. Bless God. Psalm 132 is an invitation and command to not get distracted by the bazaars at the top of the mountain selling my parents went to Jerusalem and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. Don't get distracted by the trinkets or tourist traps or by the suites in the lobby. Don't get distracted by the window shopping. Jerusalem is not a place to share gossip or trade business contacts. You made the journey through thick and thin. God is proud of you. You made it. You've arrived. Now bless God so that God can bless you. You are here because God blessed you. Now you bless God. Do that which you were created to do. Lift your voices in gratitude. I was born to sing for you, the song says. Born to lift you up, to give you back my voice from the womb. It was a joyful noise. You and I are born to bless God. And I bet on that mountaintop, some felt like doing that. Some of you are kind of excited right now. You're glad we left worship till the end. Some at the mountaintop felt like doing what Psalm 134 says to do. Come bless God, lift your praising hands and bless God. And you know what? I bet you some didn't feel like it. Maybe they were tired, distracted, going through the motions. But friends, here's an important, liberating truth, not only about worship and our faith, but about life. And that is feelings don't run the show. Some of you right now are so excited to worship at the end of the service that you're saying, come on, Ken, wrap the message up. Let's get to the important part of the service. And others of you may be saying, keep going, Ken. Your long-windedness is allowing me to take a much-needed brain nap. Psalm 134 invites and commands us to bless the Lord. And then someone says, well, I don't feel like it. I don't want to be a hypocrite. I can't bless God if I don't feel like blessing God. It wouldn't be honest. And the biblical response to that is lift up your praising hands to the holy place and bless God. You can lift up your hands regardless of how you feel. It is a simple motor movement. No matter how you feel, just do this right now. Look at that. We could all do it. You may not be able to command your heart, but you can command your arms. I'm getting deep now. Here we go. Lift your hands in blessing, and just maybe your heart will get the message and be lifted up also in praise. See, I'm going to go wander here for a second. We are psychosomatic beings. Body and spirit are intricately interrelated. Intricately interrelated. That is a hard phrase to say. I said it twice. Intricately, now I blew it. Psychosomatic beings go through the motions of blessing God, and your spirit will pick up the cue and follow along. This is important. John Calvin said, "For why do men lift their hands when they pray? Is it not that their hearts may be raised at the same time to God?" There's a similarity between the directions in the Psalms and the concept known as behavior modification, which means that you can act yourself into a new way of being. They say it, fake it till you make it. Find the right things to do, practice the actions, and other things will follow. Lift up your praising hands to the holy place and bless God. Act your gratitude, pantomime your thanks, and you will become that which you do. This is true. I did a study this week about smiling. Smile. When you physically smile, endorphins are released and it makes you happier, even when you're not happy. In fact, they say one of the most powerful times to smile is when you're worried or when you're grumpy. Just smile, and your body, you can fake your body out. It's true. In the middle of the night, this just last night, I was kind of grumpy because I wasn't sleeping well, and so then I got the giggles because I'm laying in bed smiling, just in the dark. Come on, work. And then I laugh. If somebody could take a picture of this is just, but you know, it at least distracted me from what I was worried about. Smile. Our bodies are connected to our emotions. You see, there are days when I wake up and I can't wait to get to my lime tree and pray and meditate and to reflect. And then there are days where I'm not as excited. I don't really feel it. But I do it anyway. And many times, the days I don't feel like it are the days that bless me most, where my feelings follow my actions. Many think that the only way to change your behavior is to first change your feelings. Take a pill, alter your mood so you don't kick the dog, turn on music when you're in the car so you don't run over the slow driver in front of you. But there's an older wisdom that puts it differently. By changing our behavior, we can change our feelings. One person says, "I don't like that person, therefore I will not speak to him. If my feelings change, I might." Another says, "I don't like that person, therefore I will go speak to him." The person, surprised at the friendliness, cheerfully responds, and suddenly a connection is made. One person says, "I don't feel like worshiping, therefore I'm not going to church. I will wait till I feel like it." Another says, "I don't feel like worshiping, therefore I will go to church and put myself in the way of worship." And in the process, she finds herself blessed and begins in turn to bless others. Okay, I've beaten this into the ground. But being blessed and blessing, living a life of gratitude and worship is not about feelings. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it isn't. It's about showing up. Let me give you a really old reference, but I love the quote. Humphrey Bogart, there's a reference. Humphrey Bogart defined a professional as a person who did a better job when he didn't feel like it. I love that. That goes for our faith too. Feelings don't run the show. There's a reality deeper than our feelings. Another deep truth about worship, as I hit this at another angle, is this. Worship is about taking God seriously, but not so much ourselves. It's about taking God seriously. Now I'm going to go from preaching to meddling a little bit right here. Worship and praise reminds us of this. That it's about taking God seriously, but not so much ourselves. Karl Barth is one of my favorite theologians. He's German. You don't think of theologians as like fun people to hang around, right? Especially German theologians. Eisen, Fleissen, Lesen, like, wow, you guys are a party. They're not the kind of people you think, well, I want to hang out with a theologian. He's one of the greatest theologians of all time. His mind was massive, his learning immense, his theological understanding was simply staggering. Look at those eyes. You can see the mischief in those eyes. He wrote a 6 million word, 7,000-page, 12-volume book on church dogmatics. Wow. Plus 50 other books. But what he was known for and what he lived for is what he called, and this is a German word, we're going to learn German, Dankbarkeit. Everybody say Dankbarkeit. That's German for gratitude. He says, I live for gratitude. This deep thinker, this deep theologian that knew so much and studied so much, always and everywhere, Barth, through gratitude, responded to God's blessings, and there was always a twinkle on the edges of his eyes, always. He lived During World War II, as a German, the Nazis, he was a cohort with Dietrich Bonhoeffer. But he never took himself seriously and always took God seriously, and therefore he was full of cheerfulness, exuberant with blessing. And listen what this theologian challenges us. He says, the theologian who has no joy in his work is not a theologian at all. Sulky faces, morose thoughts, and boring ways of speaking are intolerable in the science of theology. Wow. Once Barth was on a bus in Basel, the Swiss city in which he lived, and a man came and sat beside him as a tourist. Barth struck up a conversation. You're a visitor, yes? What do you want to see in our city? And the man said, I would like to see the great theologian Karl Barth. Do you know him? Oh, yes, Barth says. I shave his face every morning. And the man went away satisfied, telling his friends that he had met Karl Barth's barber. Because he refused to take himself seriously, and he took God seriously, Barth burdened neither himself nor those around him with the gloomy, heavy seriousness of ambition, pride, and self-importance. Charles Dickens described one of his characters in Great Expectations, Georgiana, as a person with indigestion who called her rigidity her religion. We find that kind of thing far too often in our world, but thankfully, we do not find it in Scripture, and we do not find it in the life of Christ. In Scripture, we find Jesus concluding his parable of the lost sheep with the words, I tell you there is more what? Joy in heaven over one sinner who changes his heart and life than over 99 good people who don't need to change. What's the word? Joy. Not relief, not surprise, not, well, it's about time you got your act together. No, joy. Karl Barth says, joy is the simplest form of gratitude. One of my new favorite quotes is folklorist Bill Ivey. He says, misery might love company, but so does joy, and joy throws better parties. The biggest joy party should be happening right here as we worship God. On our journey, we are called to be grateful and joyful. Why? Because blessing is at the end of the road. And that which is at the end of the road influences everything that takes place along the pilgrimage and along the road. As the psalmist says, bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits. Bless the Lord. That's what we're called to do. Dan Allender, he's a president of a theology school in the Northwest, and he's a fascinating leader. If you met him, you wouldn't know that he's the president of a theological seminary. It's where men and women are being trained to be pastors. And he writes in his book, Bold Love, he says that sometimes he calls one of these people who are being trained to be pastors into his office, and he says something like this. You have been around here for several months now, and I've had an opportunity to observe you. You get good grades, seem to take your calling to ministry seriously, work hard, and have clear goals. But I don't detect any joy. You don't seem to have any pleasure in what you're doing. And I wonder if you should not reconsider your calling into ministry. And then he says this, I'll put it on the screen. For if a pastor is not in touch with joy, it will be difficult to teach or preach convincingly that the news is good. If you do not convey joy in your demeanor and gestures and speech, you will not be an authentic witness for Jesus Christ. Delight in what God is doing is essential to our work. Wow. The first question, I'm almost done here. We're going to get to worship. The first question in the famous Westminster Shorter Catechism written in 1647, which was popularized by Martin Luther, the first question is a great question. What is the chief end of man? What is the chief end of man? What is the final purpose? What is the main thing about us when we get to the mountaintop? What is the main thing? And the answer is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Wow. Glorify, enjoy. If that doesn't make you smile, smile anyway. Science says it'll make you feel better. There are other things involved in our faith journey, I understand. The songs of Ascent have shown us this. But it's extremely important to know the one thing that overrides everything else is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Isn't that the coolest thing in the world? This is what we get to do and be. The main thing in our lives is not to work, suffer, witness for the Lord, teach Sunday school for the Lord, sacrifice for the Lord. Those are all good things, but the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. And when you do that, everything else takes care of itself. Or, as in the vocabulary of Psalm 134, come, bless God, all you servants of God. Lift your praising hands to the holy place and bless God. In turn, may God of Zion bless you, God who made heaven and earth. So, friends, we worship a God, and I want you to picture this as we worship today. We worship a God who stands, stoops, and stays. You are here because God blessed you. Now the psalm says, now bless God. So we take God seriously around here, but not so much ourselves. Remembering the chief end of man is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. Amen? You see, we eventually have to go home. These pilgrimages, they eventually had to go home and get back to work and the reality of life. But for a moment, Psalm 134 says, put everything else aside. Just put everything else aside and worship God, whether you feel like it or not. For feelings don't run the show. So I'm going to have Rob come up, and we're going to just spend some time in worship. Oh, I forgot to do this. So we're going to spend some time in worship. And this is what we're going to do. I think Rob's going to have you sit for a while, and then we'll stand. But we started this whole series with a quote from another theologian, N.T. Wright. And I want us to read this out loud together. If you just put your hands out like this, and if it's up there, okay, let's do it. Let's read it out loud together. Sometimes the only thing to do is to hold the spectacular promises of God in one hand and the messy reality of life in the other, and praise Yahweh anyway. God bless you.